This is not the episode I had planned for today, but I had a question come up in a conversation with a client recently, and it gave me a desire to do something a little behind the scenes. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to take you into sort of the aftermath of my mid year review, and we're going to talk about the three goals I have for this podcast in the back half of this year, why they're my goals, etc., etc. Let's get into it. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. Down with a client recently to do their mid-year review, and they asked some really great questions about my mid-year review, some of the things I noticed in my own show, and more importantly, we started talking about how I make the decisions around what to do next when I sit down and do my own mid-year review. And admittedly, this is not existing in a vacuum. So some of this is going to really speak to the overall sort of focus of my business in the back half of this year. Uh, but I really loved having this conversation with my client, and I thought, is this helpful? What might this be helpful here? One of the things I do a lot on this show is talk about things and try and get you to ask questions about your own show. And I think sometimes I do a decent job of tying that into sort of my own show as an example and sort of the decisions I'm making. And I thought this would be an opportunity for me to really practice transparency and take you into my own thinking and getting to see the outcome of that thinking as I process it. So stay with me. These are all decisions I've already made. I'm not sort of verbally processing at you today. We'll be a little tidier than that. But I am going to talk about sort of why these goals are my goals. Because I don't know that we talk enough about that. And what I want you to understand before we get into that is you're going to notice that the why is often sales driven. And the reason I want you to notice that is because I want you to use that as the permission slip to make sales based decisions more frequently in your own show. Because as I sit down with clients, specifically in podcast strategy intensives, for the most part, our production clients don't run into this too often because they're well practiced at this now. We've been doing it for a while with most of them. But with my podcast strategy intensive clients, sometimes there will be a necessary heart to heart, call it, around being okay with being salesy in your show, because frankly, that's the purpose. And I talk a lot about this, but to not infuse sales into your content as an expert using your podcast to sell your services or your expertise in whatever container that may look like, coaching, consulting, done for you services, whatever. It's kind of like taking the horse to water and then not letting them drink. Like, I know I have said this repeatedly. You have heard me say this before. I'm going to say it again, just spoiler alert. But it is a huge disservice. And so one thing I really want you to hear as we're going through this is that in almost every case, it ultimately comes down to sales. It is an offer first situation, because every bit of content that happens here is that. It is intentionally built to drive you to a decision. And that decision might not be to buy now. In most cases, it probably won't be to buy right this very mother loving second, but it will be to buy at some point, or it will be to never buy, or it will be to buy now, or whatever the case may be. I need you to make a decision. It's probably not the last decision you'll ever make with me, but I need you to make the next one. All right? All right. I'm going to be honest. These are not my favorite kind of episodes to record. They're a little too about me. So stay with me. All right? We're going to practice patience of all kinds today. Before we get into it, I do want to let you know, if you haven't yet, you can join us over at the podcast newsroom. You can get access to the whole library of Q&As that we've done so far this year. We've answered some really big questions around sales stuff, around content plans. I highly recommend checking it out, thepodcastnewsroom.com, if you have not yet set up your feed. And if you have set up your feed, don't forget it's in your podcast player. It's super easy to forget that. So head on over there and check out what's been happening in this first half of the year. We've got some more fun stuff happening in the back half of this year over there. All right. All right. I can't put this off anymore. Let's Let's dig in to my goals for the back half of this year. Up first, we're going to be testing a new opt-in that is integrated with the content. We are in the build phase right now, so I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds of it, but I'm super stoked about this. Essentially, what we'll be doing is we're using a tool created by a very, very, very cool SaaS company and colleague of mine. I'm not going to share specifics yet because we're very likely going to do a whole episode around it in some point in the back half of this year. So I don't want to get too in the weeds, but what it will allow people to do is go in and engage with the podcast content uh, and clarify their questions, clarify their frustrations, get some additional support right there on the episode page. I'm really, really excited about this because it's allowing me to do something that is sort of a brand value, which is getting the most juice out of my content as I can. And also really being accessible to people where they are and when they're there. Meaning, one of the things I really prioritize in my content is making sure that I've got titles and SEO optimization in place so that people can find these resources when they need these resources. I think it's really easy when we're talking about podcast planning and podcast content and really content of any kind uh around, oh, well, I'm going to be releasing this in July and so I need to be aware of this, and people are doing that, and let's make sure we watch out for XYZ holiday or whatever the case may be. And when we build assets instead of just episodes, we have to layer in, yes, the larger time in which we're distributing it, but also the long tail of discovery. And I think this is too often a place where people miss a really big opportunity to differentiate their show from a group of assets and a group of episodes. And if you're not thinking about that long tail, you're ending up in that latter category of episodes, which is not bad, but not as good as it could be. And so building out this new opt-in, building out this new tool is really about that accessibility even when I'm not around. Here's a way to ask me a question when I'm not here, and get what you need using my content. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be a really cool thing. And the thing I'm most excited about, sort of beyond the podcast, is this goal for me is really centered around the desire, sort of the larger, more sort of like encompassing goal of doing a better job of using my email list. I'm not great about using my email list. I'm not great about building my email list. Uh, I'm a great podcaster. And I do send out an email every week when this podcast goes out. An email goes out when we've got a sales cycle happening for, like we just did one for summer camp, or, we've got an intensive sales cycle that we'll see later in the summer. We've got some production stuff we might run in Q4, depending on how Q3 goes. I've got sales sequences, and I'll run those from time to time, but that's about it. Like, I'm good enough at using my email list that I get to say that I am executing email marketing responsibilities, but I'm not using it in a way where it's fair for me to expect gangbuster results. You know what I mean? And I would like to jump that that valley this year in the back half of the year. And so this is a place where, and I'm highlighting this because I want you to understand that this is not a silo. But this is a place where I'm creating a goal inside of my podcast or around my podcast in support of a larger business goal that will help drive sales. And so there are some things I have in development. There are some ideas I have in place that are really, honestly, they're going to require me to have a better, more engaged email list than I have right now. And that means having to change my process and my habits. And I do an excellent job of checking the email box. When these episodes get scheduled, emails get written, those emails get saved in my system in the same way everything else does, so that when we re-release something, we can send that email. And, I'm building these things very intentionally, but I'm not using them as completely as I could. And where I really drop off, where I really don't do a good job, is driving traffic to grow the email list, to build the email list. And so that's really my focus in the back half of this year. And that's going to come through in two of these goals. So you're going to hear me actually talk about this as we wrap up with goal 3 too. But initially, sort of my first step where I'm looking at this is building out a better opt-in, building out a better system for getting people on the list by building something that's valuable and usable and integrated and built from something I'm already doing. So that's why we're going to be focusing a lot on email stuff in the back half of this year. Goal number 2, I've got another repeatable series on my mind. We're a couple weeks out now when you're hearing this from the annual re-release of the podcast housekeeping series. I continue to love that series. I continue to love its structure in my calendar. I continue to love the feedback that I get from it. It's a great resource. It's one of the favorite things I've done in my show. I enjoy getting to teach that as a process to other people. I love the repeatable series. And it's time for me to build another one. And since we launched the podcast launch accelerator earlier this year, I have had this on my mind and it keeps getting pushed down the idea list. Yeah, that's a great idea. I should do that. But I have not. And so we're going to fix that. We are going to start structuring and outlining, and it will run at the beginning of next year. But so let's take a step back. This counts as a goal for the back half of this year, even though it won't actually run until next year, because I will build it and record it and schedule it this year, because I have all of my content done through the end of February before the end of November in most cases. And so I want this to run to probably kick off the year. We'll either run it in January or February. uh, because I like the idea of running it when people are thinking about launching shows. But we're going to build a repeatable series all around launching. So if you've ever wondered how I launch shows, if you've ever wondered what that process looks like, if you've ever wanted to work alongside me in a podcast launch, well, then you should sign up for the accelerator and launch your show. But that repeatable series will be coming in Q1 of this year, which means development will happen in Q3 or Q4 of this year. I'm super stoked about this because, again, I love a repeatable series, but I also, and maybe more importantly, I'm excited about this because this is a sales first decision. And that's why I wanted to include it in this list, because this is purely and unabashedly completely founded in the idea that I want to build something that helps me sell that program, because I love getting to do those. I've had a great time doing them this year with clients. And frankly, I'd like to do more of them next year. Whenever I'm looking at my mid-year review, it is ultimately for me the start of my next year planning, because the work I do in the back half of this year is not really about this year in my brain. It is about next year. It is about setting a foundation for next year. Because I'm yes, I'm reflective. Yes, I'm looking at where I've been so that I can make informed decisions about where I want to go next, but I'm always looking forward. I'm always looking at what's next. I am somebody who sets a goal and then gets 2/3 of the way there and then moves the goalpost back a little. Like it's not always a good thing, but it's where we're at. And so when I start looking at what I want to do with the back half of my year, it is largely about me setting up next year. And next year, I have some sales goals around the Launch Accelerator and the Podcast Strategy Intensive because those are the things that I can fill. Those are the things that I can make space for more regularly than onboarding a full on year round retainer production client. And so that will largely be my sales focus for next year. I have now set up the housekeeping series to sell the podcast strategy intensive. I wanted slash needed another solid asset that I could be putting people through, that I could be sharing with people that helps sell that other sort of pillar offering for me. Because ultimately my goal, and this has been the case in some cases and still some people come through referral, but my ultimate goal is that our retainer production clients really come by way of intensive or the accelerator. Now, again, I'm almost sure I will almost always have that's a lot of almost some component of production clients that just come in via referral because I've got a fantastic referral network. I've got a fantastic network of people I work with. I have really amazing clients who are happy to share my name with the people in their world who are looking for support, like what my team and I offer. And so I'm sure we will continue to see referrals come in for production. And I have built out these two offerings to be another way to get clients in beyond referrals because I don't want to be solely dependent on referrals. I want to have lots of roads in. And so for me, this next step in now that I have tested this offer this year and I know I like this accelerator, now it's time to really build intentional assets to sell it. And there are some assets in by way of episodes, standalone episodes in this show so far, but we don't have anything serious like a series, like I do for the intensive with the podcast housekeeping series. And so this really is built offer first. This really is okay. I know next year I want these kind of sales results. I know that this time of year I've got people who are really open to this idea. What does it look like to be consistently running that content to speak to that group of people about that offering and really front loading my year with some intensives, or in this case, the accelerator. So that is my goal, my second goal. Now let's wrap it up with goal 3. And it kind of ties back to our email list. Frankly, so does the launch stuff, if I think about it hard enough. But goal 3 really ties back into our email list growth, and that's having more conversations. And so that's going to look like two things. Me being a guest on other people's podcasts. So, one of the things I am doing right now, as you hear this, is I am pitching like crazy. I am sort of using the work I have been doing while I'm sort of in the season of recording these episodes and doing that planning, writing those pitches, etc. And now, as you're hearing this, I'm really in the zone of actually executing those pitches. So, having those conversations and hopefully getting to get some of those episodes booked. This might also look like, and I haven't decided on this one yet. And so, this one feels particularly kind of like itchy to share, but it may look like me having more guests on this show. I don't tend to have a lot of guests on this show. I don't tend to have guests on this show who are not clients at this point. But I have been feeling a real pull to extend my community and have conversations with more people. And I'm not actually a huge fan of a coffee date. I'm not actually a huge fan of a meeting with no real agenda or purpose. And so I love a podcast interview for a coffee date. Come in, we get to know each other, we exchange ideas, we have a conversation, and then we get to share that with other people who would also find value in that conversation. I think we show up differently when we know why we're coming together and what we're discussing, and a podcast interview facilitates that really well, and I think everybody shows up at their best. And so you might hear some guest conversations on the show. Again, I'm not guaranteeing it because I might decide, no, it's not at all what I want to do. But what you will very likely see is on social media, LinkedIn, Threads, Instagram, that's primarily where you're going to find me. You might see my face on other people's podcasts or my voice on other people's podcasts, because that is something I'm absolutely doing, because it allows me to A, drive traffic to my show. It allows me to B, drive traffic to these new opt-in I'm building. And C, it lets me build my audience and my relationships and all of those things. And that's something I'm craving hard as we close out this year, is really building more community. That's been a big push behind my presence on Threads. I've been using Threads a ton more this year. I started it right at the tail end of last year. And I love it because it allows me to have conversation, and I've met people who I had never met. One of the conversations I'm freaking loving right now, and I really wanted to do a podcast episode around, but it's not what you came here for. Is this idea of like regular schmegular business owners and regular schmegular businesses? Like, I'm at this point in my career and at this point in my life not trying to build a like 9-figure mega podcast agency that I can sell to some like huge marketing company. Like, it's not what I want. I like my business the size it is now. We might see some expansion as we move into next year, but for right now we're staying pretty sized the way we are. Uh because it serves my life, it serves where I'm at in my life. It serves the season my family is in. And I'm happy with it. I like being done by 3 or 4 every day. Uh I like having my weekends. I like having my family time. I like the almost no networking meetings that I go to. I like having conversations with the people I like having conversations with. And I'm really happy. It serves my life and the season I'm in. Doesn't mean I won't change my mind. Doesn't mean at some point I won't decide I want to grow bigger. There's certainly been bigger growth aspirations in me in the past. It's just, it's not where I'm at right now. And that's okay. But having conversations like that, being in community with people who are in that same place where they're happy to just build a business that supports the life they want to live. It's not about playing small. It's not about like, oh, well, I don't really want to do that. It's about knowing what the exchange is. And for me right now, being able to be present with my mom as she ages, with my son as he ages, with my husband as we both age. But, being able to be present in this time where my life looks like what my life looks like in this season, I want to be present to those things because I'm maybe more aware than I've ever been before that everything is seasonal. Everything in our life is just what it is right now. And so I want to make the most of that. And so being in community with people who are in that same vein, not necessarily because their season of life looks just like my season of life, but because for whatever reason right now, it's about building a business that allows them to be present in the life they live versus building a life that supports the business they want to build, which is not necessarily bad. There's certainly been seasons in my own business and in my own life where building the business did take priority over sort of what was happening in my life. There was absolutely seasons of this business where I worked 10 and 12 and 14-hour days, 5 and 6 and 7 days a week, because I was trying to build something, because I was trying to create something. And largely what I was trying to build and what I was trying to create is what I have now, which is the space to be done most days at 3 o'clock and to take my half day Fridays or take Friday off completely if I want to, or, you know, call it an early day and go to the beach. That's what I'm doing today. Whatever it may be, I want that right now, and I'm enjoying getting to keep that. And so I'm really enjoying being in community with business owners like that, because especially in the online space, it's been really easy for me to get sucked into, no, you have to want bigger, you have to want to build this empire. I'm cool with my castle. I actually don't need a whole empire. I frankly don't want to run an empire. I don't want to be responsible for the day-to-day of an empire. I like being responsible for the day-to-day of my kingdom and my castle, and that's cool for me right now. Again, might change, but for right now, I like it. And so having those kind of conversations, being in community with those kind of business owners, those kind of podcasters, and really shining a light on that is the pull to get on other people's podcasts and potentially bring more people onto my own show. Because I don't think that version of online business ownership gets the same highlights and the same attention that girl bossing does, right? And so that's it. That's the desire. That's the push for me to potentially bring guests onto the show once more. Something we have not done for many moons outside of clients. So that's it. This felt so weird. It felt very all about me. I hope it was helpful, but I wanted to bring this to you because I it highlights for me how tied together all of this is. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about is if these are the thoughts you're having. If as you're looking ahead to the end of your year and you're not sure what you want to do, or you have some goals but you're not really sure why you have them, I've been there. Uh Let's sit down. Let's have a conversation. One of the things I have been loving doing this summer on podcast strategy intensives, and we've got some geared up for the fall that I'm really excited about, is really helping our clients, yes, plan what's happening in the short term in their show as far as like their content plan, but also as we look at their show as a whole, start to lay out for them some places that they could be shooting towards, uh, giving them some direction as they move into what they might want for next year, not because we're solving all of those questions, or finding solutions for all of those problems, but or even outlining an absolute structure to get to, XYZ goal, but largely because I want you thinking about it. I want you thinking about it a lot more often than you're thinking about it now, and I want you to be thinking about it more holistically than you're thinking about it now. So, podcast strategy intensive is a really good way for you and I to get to spend a couple of hours together doing that short-term content planning, but also that long-term projection around where you want your show to go so that you can be little by little moving that needle in that direction. If you would like to sit down for a podcast strategy intensive in the back half of this year, I'd like to see you get that booked. Head on over to uncommonlymore.com/intensive. Get your spot reserved. If you're not sure if an intensive is right for you, you'll also see an option on that page to book a quick call with me. You and I can sit down. I'm happy to talk through what that might look like. And if this is the right option for you, or if there's another way of working together that might be better. Cool? uncommonlymore.com/intensive. I will see you there. And of course, right back here next week. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.